In reading, I found myself relaxing and feeling trustworthy. I don't know why I would feel this way. I used to think it was the withdrawal factor. I was in my own private world. I didn't have to go out, and other people didn't have to come in. There were no obligations regarding what should or shouldn't be done between me and the world. There was no debt I owned. Books are here for me, only me, to enjoy, to get lost in the words, to empty my internet information-saturated mind. That was my original anticipation before reading the second chapter of Every Love Story is a Ghost Story. After graduating from high school, David went to Amherst. He roomed with two other young men who wanted to be doctors. They studied together and ate together. But soon David found that spending time with his roommates was easy. It was the place they chose that annoyed him, their dormitory. Spiders were cool, exposing their huge fangs as if trying to bite him through the glass. He quickly came to prefer the library. After dinner time, Wallace would study for the next 6 hours until the library closed. Over time, he found study spaces on campus that stayed open all night. This intensive study schedule made Wallace feel good. Great grades made him feel relaxed. Studying became part of his daily routine. He no longer worried about disappointing his parents or wasting their money. In his first semester, Wallace aced everything, earning an A+ in Introduction to Philosophy. Later that semester, Wallace met his lifelong best friend, Mark Costello. Mark Costello was a bright, mischievous boy who, like Wallace, lived in Stearns and spent every waking hour in the library. A friendship soon developed, with Wallace letting Costello in on the sacred places where he liked to study. The next year, Wallace asked Costello to room with him. Costello agreed. Everything seemed wonderful. Wallace was happy. He used to worry about how to cope with the new college environment, but it was no use to worry. He had a friend he totally trusted, and his grades were way beyond anyone's expectations. He joined the school debate team, despite being afraid of public speaking, as his voice was reedy and stuttered when he was nervous. He participated because being on the team would look good on his transcript if he applied to law school. But when he returned to school after Christmas, he was no longer sure. He was familiar with his anxiety and had routinely dealt with it for many years. But this time was different. He told Costello that Christmas had been bad. He felt desperate and thought of hurting himself. One day, his father's mentor, William Kinnick, saw what was going on with Wallace and took him to a therapist. Shortly after, Costello came into their room to find Wallace slumped over, his gray suitcase between his legs. Wallace said, "I have to go home." Costello replied by asking, "What's wrong?" Wallace said something that he worried about the school would put someone awful to room with Costello after he's gone, and he had let his roommate down. He went home very soon. His family knew what was going on, but no one had the audacity to bring it up. They let Wallace come and go as he wanted. They thought if he wanted to talk about, he would. Over time, Wallace began to feel better. Instead of talking about how he felt, he found a better way: writing. Wallace wrote letters to his friends, wrote papers for his professors, and also wrote some fiction. The cost of mind he thought it took to be a writer was scary to him, but he decided to give it a try. Because why not? He was at home. The Clambirds, a story he was working on, is about a fictional bird that flies in an ever-decreasing circles until it disappears up its own ass. He wrote poems and sent them to Costello to read. Costello remembers getting a letter from Wallace announcing that he wanted to write fiction that would still be read 100 years from now. When he returned to MS in the fall of 1982, Wallace continued to excel academically. He enrolled in logic, Christian ethics, and Asian and medieval philosophy with Kinnick. He aced all of them. Kinnick restricted papers to 5 pages because he thought the compression made for better thinking. Wallace had a brain that could think faster than his mouth and didn't know how to write short papers. Koenig gave Wallace an A+ anyway. During the summertime, Wallace thought about fiction again, but with a different attitude. He had always had affection for fiction. He read every book on his parents' shelf, but none made him feel attached. One day, when Wallace and Costello were discussing 100 Years of Solitude, another friend gave them a copy of The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. Every love story is a ghost story, detailed Wallace's feelings when he encountered the world of Lot 49. One day, Meg Logan had run into Wallace and Costello discussing 100 Years of Solitude and tossed them his copy of Lot 49, which they promptly read. The novel is the story of Oedipa Maas, a young woman trying to uncover a centuries-old conspiracy involving a secret postal organization known as Tristel. Maas travels around California, encountering people who give her clues to the puzzles. Or the whole action of the novel may be a hallucination or a hoax set in motion by an ex-girlfriend. The reader is left uncertain. One thing that caught Wallace's eye about the book was the idea that living in America meant living in a world of confusion, where meaning was refracted and distorted, especially by the media that engulfed and reconfigured every gesture. As one character announced, pointing at the television, "It comes into your dreams, filthy machine." Lot 49 was agile, ironic, meta-commentary, but the fact on Wallace cannot be overstated. So much so that in a later letter to one of his editors, Wallace, ever nervous about his debt to other writers, could lie and say he had never read the book. Wallace reading Pynchon remembers Costello like Bob Dylan founding Woody Guthrie. One postmodernist made way for another. Bentham was hermic. Pynchon was expensive. He tried to take in the enormity of American in a way that Bentham did not. Pynchon showed that the tone and the sensibility of mainstream culture, drawing its energy from pop songs, TV shows, and thrillers, could coexist with the serious issues in fiction. At very least, the book was funny. And Wallace already knew how to be funny. The irony of the writing was more direct version of what he and Costello had been turning out at Sabrina. Wallace heard the click in his heart this time. The whole second chapter focuses on Wallace's precious college time, how he found a good friend, how he adjusted his own needs to align with what college expected of him. He was smart, he was popular. He was the kind of student who could transform the campus objectives in the future. Being brilliant is not even the right word to describe someone like him. But just like many smart people, being smart is the battle they have to fight against the real world. Because the brain requires more detailed examination of the world itself. The emotional state they have makes them think faster, think deeper, and almost every time think wilder. Being smart is the limitation on how much you can show off because you couldn't find it easy to find the right friends or to be satisfied. And the most fractured thing is that life wouldn't treat you better for your remarkable brain functions. So what can you do? Wallace found a way, the most creative, vulnerable, protective, but most unsustainable way to survive in the real world. How he succeeded? Let's get the answer in the next DFW episode.